many of you have or will be traveling somewhat of a distance to be with family at Christmas? Okay. Of course, I got to ask this guy right here. You know, I had to pick on you. So where are you traveling from?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Anybody traveling further than that? From Los Angeles. So good that you're here. And for all of us, we probably know that this season, when we watch the newscasts, there's understandably a lot of emphasis on weather. You know, where are the storms, snowstorms, rainstorms, floods, whatever, where are flights delayed, all of that, because people want to know. It's that season, and so many people are traveling. About 4 or 5 years ago, when I was at St. Bernard Parish, I remember talking to a couple there that had come to the Christmas morning 10 a.m. Mass. And I saw them afterward, and they were traveling to see family here in the area. But what struck me is that this couple, they just had such a wonderful positive spirit, and they said to me, which was nice to hear as the priest, this is one of the most meaningful, best Masses we've ever celebrated. And as you probably know by now, I like to be in touch with people's story. And so I asked, well, what about that? And even as I thought about it, I knew that yes, maybe I had something that I could say that inspired them, but usually when people are so deeply moved, it's also about something that they are open to being touched by God. What's happening in them. Because it calls, if any preaching, it's put out there, but the difference made is if people are open in their heart, and if somehow the message is something that they needed to hear and want to reflect upon and appreciate. And that was the case here. When I talked to them about their story, they shared that, again, the whole coming to the Akron area, they were from, I think, Minnesota, somewhere up through there, they had set out the previous day, morning they were flying, and so they were hoping that as they flew that they were supposed to get to the Akron area, I think around 12 noon, and they were excited because they wanted to make sure they were plenty of time to see their granddaughter in kind of the Christmas Children's Mass. She had a part in it, and many of you are grandparents and parents and great-grandparents and know how much people enjoy that and want to share. Of course, then they went on to tell me the flight got delayed. And they didn't get to the Akron area till 7 p.m., missing totally the 4 p.m. family Mass. And obviously, as they shared, they were disgruntled, they were frustrated, they wanted to be there. And of course, then I had to ask them, I said, well, it seems like your attitude has changed today from last night, and can understand why that was frustrating. And then is when they made the point that, it was something you said in your homily. And again, it was also something they were open to hearing in their heart. And I said, well, what is that? And what I had talked about, which I've probably done other Christmases even here, is how that first Christmas for Mary and Joseph, they had every reason to be disgruntled, frustrated, and angry. And we look at it. First of all, Mary was in her 9th month when they had to go to Bethlehem, for the census. Like, couldn't it have been in her 3rd or 4th month? Why that timing? She could have easily thought maybe she had a moment where she did. God, your timing just isn't really good here. And then, and you need to know this, again, having been in the Holy Land just recently, the distance between Nazareth, where they lived, and Bethlehem was about 80 miles. And really. And they didn't have, automobiles or anything else. They were coming on a donkey, and what was said was probably that trip took them 10 to 12 days, mainly walking. So that was a long, arduous trip. And then, of course, getting there in Bethlehem and looking forward to being in some inn, real comfortable and nice. After all, she's giving the birth for the coming Messiah. But we know the rest of the story. The innkeeper, no room here. And back then, and we saw this when we were in Bethlehem, and it was sacred to be there and in a sense to reverence that very area where the Christ came to share our humanity, to show the Father's love. And so they said, well, you know, back then they talked about how they had caves, that it was a cave probably below and beside the inn, and that's typically where they put the animals. Every family had animals, they needed them. They certainly didn't want them on the same level with themselves, and so a cave down below. So they were able to go and do that. And again, they might have thought, here, this, with the animals? Come on, I'm bringing to birth the Son of God. Can't you do something better? Of course, they didn't say that. They may have had their moments, but they had a real sense of joy and peace that didn't come from their outer circumstances, obviously, but came from their inner spirit, being touched by the living God, in a way, in a real way, bringing birth to the Christ. But the reality is the Christ wants to be born in each one of us in some real spiritual way. And that's where they and we can find peace. Circumstances, no. Wished it were different. But that's secondary to what's going on in here. They were focused on God. They were focused on their love for each other. They were focused on giving birth to a beautiful baby. And thinking about that, this family then said to me, this couple, they said, you spoke that and it just really went right into our hearts. Because they had been still disgruntled. They had felt like, gee, they came all this way and Christmas isn't going to be that great this year. But their listening and their open-heartedness to that message, it transformed them in one mass. Because the Lord did speak to their hearts and they heard. And they thanked me and thanked God, you know, that now they were going to have even a more meaningful Christmas because they were very clear on what matters most. They were with each other in love, and God was with them, and they were with their family, even if they didn't make it to that part of the family gathering. They were with each other. They had a belief in God, and they adhere, as they said, you know, basically, and other people have said this, we believe in God, but we realize a lot of times we don't let His love touch us and give us the peace and joy He wants us to have, you know, which is a reminder that true peace and joy is an inner job. It comes first of all from in here. And adding to that, now going back to the gospel today, the visitation, we see again Mary going to visit Elizabeth, her kinswoman. She knows she's with child. That trip too was about 80 miles from Nazareth to the Judean region where Elizabeth was. And understandably, Mary was with child in the first couple months. And she could have said, well, you know, it's an inconvenient time to do that now. You know, maybe I'll wait. Elizabeth will give birth, and I'll see her after she's born, and neither one of us are pregnant at that time, and we can get around easier. She could have said that. She might have even thought that. But touched by God's love, experiencing that what was birthing in her, obviously, when we are touched by love from the very beginning, that ought to call us to want to share that love. And even if it's inconvenient, even if it's demanding, even if it's difficult for whatever the reason. And so for her, that movement of the Spirit within her, that goodness and love, yes, she was excited about sharing that with her kinswoman Elizabeth. Even though 80 miles, again, on hill country, probably took her 2 weeks or so. And she could have complained all the way. And as I said, she may have had her moments, but she was there. And her focus was on the Lord God and what was happening and the difference He was making in both their lives. And so when they came together in that great visitation, it was a joyful occasion. Joyful. They weren't thinking about what was not going right or timing or anything like that. They were focused on the joy of knowing the touch of God's love and sharing that as family. So for all of us, again, practical application for any of us. hey, whatever's happening in the next couple days, don't let what's going out there keep you from having a peace and a joy in here. And if you have one of those frustrating moments, maybe the important thing is in faith we're not always going to be focused, but we can be resilient. If we catch ourselves, upset about something, kind of really to be open to God's touch and say, hey, let's see this in the big scheme of things. Let's see what matters most. And hopefully we can have that resilience and bounce back into a deeper sense of the inner peace and inner joy the Lord wants to give us. And finally, when we think about that family and any parents, grandparents, or anybody else, just like Mary, when we've been touched by God's love, obviously we want to share it. We want to experience that love in family life, especially as this couple realized, and not let anything else keep us from a deep, joyful love for one another. Even with all our idiosyncrasies, to remember everybody in our life is ultimately a gift from God. Maybe some of those gifts are difficult, and God can use them to stretch us and help us to be kind and loving anyway. So let's take a quiet moment and see what the Lord maybe is trying to say to each of our hearts here. Like that couple, they were open. There may be a message for every one of us. Listen and see what it might be. God bless you.